I'm so excited to introduce you to Max Polec, who is the founder and executive coach of the CEO Strategy, where he has served over 300 entrepreneurs, executives, and leaders over the past 4 years. Max's deep experience in startups and business with his background in growth strategy, operation, and talent development. Max is also an avid reader, woodworker, and traveler. He strives to be a builder of people and coach leaders who aspire to be multipliers. Max is based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Take a listen. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we have a lot of things to dive into and lots of questions that I think are really important for any CEO, founder, person that is in a position where they are making an impact and influence. So I want to start though with a little bit of your background. So, you've had so much experience in the startup world. So I'm really curious what led you to here and your focus now with executive coaching. That's the first part of the question. I'm really curious about what led you to this part of your work.
Yeah, that's a great question. As we all do, we wear different hats for different roles, and I think probably the best place to start is going to be with some definitions. So I've been a consultant, I've been an advisor, I've been a mentor, and now I'm a coach. And what I like to do is be able to build common ground by saying, what my definitions are for those things to be able to help answer the question of, so you're an executive coach. What exactly is that? What exactly do you do? So when I think of consulting, typically you go to a consultant with a problem and they fix it for you, right? You come to me, you say, Max, I have a problem, solve it for you, and we're off to the races. On advising, that's someone where you go to them and they tell you what to do. They give you advice. Hopefully you listen, you apply that advice, you move forward. And then mentoring is this idea that we go to a mentor. Typically, they tell us some kind of parable or story or anecdote. There's a lesson in there somewhere that we apply and we move forward. And with me wearing those hats before, what I always found is there was this weird dichotomy of the other person becoming reliant on that second person. I'm reliant on the consultant to fix the problem. I'm reliant on the advisor to tell me what to do. I'm reliant on the mentor to tell me a story, to find the best practice and move forward. With coaching, it's based on this fundamental common ground that the person is whole, the person has all the answers. And basically, the role that I play is as a thinking partner. So I will hold space, I will ask questions, I will listen. And the goal of a coaching call is ultimately to work with someone on a specific topic, typically around a challenge they have or an opportunity that they're working for, and be able to ask those questions to capture these insights and then translate those insights into action. And the thing that I love about that is it helps this person develop self-efficacy around how to coach themselves. And I know I'm making really good progress when I'm in a coaching engagement and someone asks a question or comes to a thought and says, wait a minute, I know what question I need to ask myself. And they kind of work through the problem, sometimes with me just listening. And the best part about coaching work is I don't get a call after the engagement to say, hey, Max, it's broken again, because they're all set. They've got the growth that they need. And that growth typically is much longer term than a short term fix like, oh, it's broken. Let's get a consultant to fix this for us. So that was the definition piece. And what brought me ultimately to executive coaching is I had my own coach and I kind of learned and saw the impact it had on me. And I was like, what if I looked into doing this to be able to better serve founders, executives, leaders? And it's been very beneficial, very transformative for me and also for those that I work with. So that's kind of my meandering path to executive coaching.
I'm so glad you mentioned that and outline the definitions because I think people use them so interchangeably sometimes. They're
Yeah,
so woven together, and it's helpful to create a baseline and say, well, no, they're actually different. The outcomes are different. The journeys and the rules of getting there are very different. So that baseline is so helpful for us, especially now as we think about your own approach. So, um, you've worked with, hundreds of startup founders and your background's so fascinating because you've pivoted in a lot of these different areas. So I'm very curious in terms of trends. So what trends have you noticed in early stage companies as they scale, right? Especially in today's, business landscape, it's ever evolving. What are some things that you've noticed or trends that you've seen as you've continued to work with founders and companies?
Yeah, I very much so have this belief that the founder, the leadership of an early stage startup, they can be either a multiplier or a ceiling for the venture success. And what I mean by that is if they're an excellent leader, if they're executing well, they'll be able to multiply the efforts that is done across the startup and be more likely to succeed. Vice versa, if they're not a good leader, if they're not operating well, they're going to be a ceiling. It's going to be hard to be able to push back. For lack of a better word, the incompetency or the lackingness of a leader. So when I think of the startup founders that I meet and the ones that excite me, really focusing on the person here, I think of certain habits or certain processes that they have. So the first one is that they're really able to get a lot of stuff done, both a quantity of things, because there's always a ever growing to-do list, but also the right things. So there's that balance of can I be both productive and strategic? They're also really stellar communicators because if you think about it, you're building something brand new. You have to pitch yourself to, I can do this, to general people, to the media, to investors, to your co-founder, to early hires. So storytelling is really, really important to be able to build and share that vision and recruit the people that you need to get the capital, get the resources, and also get the talent to take your startup from where it is, whether it's an idea or prototype, to a startup that's growing and growing and growing. And also, they're really good leaders. It's one of those things where I think leadership is not talked about enough with startup founders. But at a certain point, you're going to have to make the transition from founder to CEO, and that is a different skill set. So I really like founders who have either a little bit of leadership experience beforehand, or they're open to saying, I don't know what I don't know. I know I need to evolve and work on this, and I want to start early so I can get those repetitions in now so that it's easier as I grow and build my business. And the last one, this is more of a personal preference, a good heart. I have a extreme bias for wanting to work with people who want to do good in the world, want to have impact in the world. So whenever I meet a founder who's both competent, they're able to get stuff done, they're able to storytell and be very strategic, and they want to have a good impact in their sphere of the world, whether that's their customers, their community, et cetera, et cetera. Those are things that I look for and things that really excite me about founders that are building out their startups right now.
I love that. And that's so important to, whoever you want to work with for them to have not just the passion, but the heart to do something. So I'm so glad that you had mentioned that. And now I'm curious about some of the frameworks. So you talk about and you focus on strategy frameworks that scale. Right? So can you talk us through that and maybe give us an example of some frameworks that you might recommend to CEOs and why you think it's been so effective in helping them drive growth?
Yeah. I think something that is not prioritized enough is communication. And all too often I'll meet, a founder or a co-founding team, and they're like, oh, it's just the two of us, the three of us, the four of us, the five of us. We got this down pat. But really, once you go from one to two, there's going to be the opportunity for friction with communication. So one of the frameworks that's very popular with my clients is it's called impeccable agreements. It comes from the conscious leadership group, and it's very helpful for crystal clear communication, particularly around delegation. And it's a four-step process, very straightforward. What you do is you define who specifically will do the task, what specifically is the measurable task to be done, by when will that be complete, defining a day and time, and then you document all those details of that agreement in written form, whether that's in meeting minutes or an email follow-up, to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Because all too often, we might be in a one-to-one meeting, we might be in a team meeting, and you'll hear something like, someone get this done. Or we have people discussing who's going to get what done, but then one person hears one thing, the other person hears the other thing. And what I love about this is it gives a common ground framework for people to align on. This is how we delegate tasks. This is how we manage what's to be done. And the other important piece there is that it's shared somehow in writing afterwards. So again, a follow-up email in the meeting minutes so people can review it and say, yes, that is indeed what I agreed upon. And that's something that is very, very popular with the executives and the founders that I coach. And really, if you were to just take that and generalize it a little bit more, I'm just a big fan of having a writing culture. As we capture these insights, as we capture these processes, making sure that we document them and write them down. The reason is, as we build out the team, we're going to need to onboard more people. We're going to need to train more people. And also, there's just more complexity. I remember someone told me and gave me this advice that whenever you 3x something at a startup, everything breaks. And I was a early hire head of growth at a consumer electronics company. I remember we had 3x headcount. Everything stopped working. It was like a switch was flipped. And we're like, okay, we were anticipating this now. Let's retool everything. And the same thing happened when we were able to see some really incredible revenue growth. It was very exciting, but then the train started falling off the rails. And with that, we paused, we reflected, and say, what do we have to update on how we communicate, how we delegate, the processes that we use to run the business. So, really, if there is something to consider focusing on as a founder, it's that communication piece and having a writing culture, using impeccable agreements, or even a strategic planning framework. My favorite is objectives and key results. Will go a long way. And the plus side too is all of that creates these documented artifacts that you can reference back to and say, how did we, do or handle this 6 months ago, a year ago, last week, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something or a category of frameworks that I really work a lot with folks to be able to make sure that their communication is crystal clear and they're able to move forward on their goals in an accelerated pace.
I love that. And one of the things too that I think is a common thread with everyone, and you can do all these frameworks and continue to drive growth, but one constant is this concept of burnout, right? And we've all experienced that. And that's one thing that a lot of people write in on here and they say, what are some strategies with dealing with burnout? And we know that especially with founders, it's a huge issue, startup world or not, it continues to be. So from your own experience, I don't know if we can necessarily completely avoid burnout, but that's something that I'll I'll ask you if you think that's something that we can do. But how do you help with burnout and try to, continue your growth, but also keep in mind of your own health and for lack of a better word, sanity?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And it's a topic, I think burnout and mental health more generally is very important to be able to discuss more so in founder and entrepreneur circles. I'll start first with kind of my own story with burnout, and then I'll share what's worked for me and some of the things I work with founders on. So I had teetered on the edge of burnout before. I was running an accelerator at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And when we were in session, we had a 10-week program. Those 10 weeks, I was pulling 80-hour work weeks. That was my only focus for those 10 weeks. And the only reason why I wasn't able to, or the only thing that kept me from kind of falling into burnout was that after we finished the program, we had a natural lull, right? It's a 10 weeks, kind of a set period of time and everything else. So after we finished the program, I'd be able to catch up on sleep, relax, and recharge. The issue, however, was when I was working at a consumer electronics company later in my career, where I think for the full calendar year, I probably maintained 80 to 100-hour work weeks. It's awful. I don't recommend it. And although I got a lot done at the end of that calendar year, I was exhausted. I was probably about 20, 25 pounds heavier. And that led me to say, I need to make a change. I need to balance my relationship with work. And some of the things that I personally worked on myself is when I started my business with executive coaching 5 years ago, I made one rule. I said, I'm not going to work any weekends anymore. And in the past 5 years, I've only worked 2 Saturdays. One of them was because I had a client that wanted me to help them with their business model. And to be completely honest, they paid me a lot of money to meet with them for 4 hours on a Saturday. I said, sure, I can make this happen. And then the second Saturday was I was launching a coaching program for founders, and I had a partner who was doing that with me. They sadly could not go through with it, so I had to spend a Saturday building out the curriculum myself to prepare it for the founders that we had already recruited for the program. So with that, that's not too bad. 2 Saturdays or 8 hours cumulative in 5 years is not too shabby at all. The other thing is this understanding that the work's always going to be there. No matter how much I get done, no matter how much I cross off my to-do list, there's always going to be more that I want to I get done for myself, for my business. So it's developing this frame of mind for, how much is enough and really dialing that in. Some people will create a to-do list and say, once I check off all those boxes, that's great. Some people even get very specific and say, I only want to get my big three things done. Sometimes I have, typically on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I'll have just back-to-back coaching calls all day. And my only goal is to be a impeccable coach from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And everything else can wait until the next day. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing too is understanding that we, especially as business owners, especially as entrepreneurs, we define our own success. So it's one of those things that we choose how aggressive we want to build. We choose how lofty our goals want to be. And with that, it's making sure that you're fine tuning and asking yourself the question of, is this what I really want? Is this what I can do? And the other things that come up is there's this metaphor of, envision it's like Thanksgiving dinner. You've got a full plate and you're just adding more and more onto that plate. Eventually things are going to fall off. What I do a lot with executives, a lot with leaders that are dealing with a sense of overwhelm is I'll use a couple frameworks, whether it's a time audit, which is measuring in 15-minute increments where their time goes and being able to actually get data to say, well, what can we improve there? I'll do a energy audit where we reflect on their calendar and say, out of everything on your calendar, what's giving energy, what's taking away energy. And then the other thing too is we'll just say, start, stop, continue. What are things you need to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing? The most important piece of that 3-question framework is what are you going to stop doing? What are you going to take off your plate? Because all too often, and I see this with high achievers, we find success with multiple things and we're like, oh, we have to keep doing these. We have to keep going and going and going. But there's only so much bandwidth, so much time, so much energy we have. So oftentimes I'll work with founders to be able to say, what is the non-essential that you can either completely stop doing or train a team member, build trust in them and have them take over, delegate that out. Last but not least on that topic too, and this gets kind of more on the emotional side of things, does it really matter if we build this incredibly successful high revenue business if we lose ourselves in the process, right? So it's one of those things that's something I always couch myself in. I believe as a life principle that relationships are all that matter in the end. And it's one of those things that, I am most full when I'm being able to spend time and be present with friends, family, loved ones. And no amount of work is going to be able to replace that. And I want to make sure that I have first things first in that regard. So that's a little bit of a sampler plate, if you will, of burnout, from my story to some things that worked with me and also some frameworks that I'll use with people who are kind of in that sense of overwhelm in their career, in their leadership journey.
That's so great. And I'll follow up with that on somewhat of a, I say it's a selfish question because I know it wasn't on, list of questions that I wanted to ask, but I'm curious. So, you talk about how, from 9 to 6 or whatever that looks like, you're working with, clients, you're coaching, right? How do distractions play into that? Because I always find that I get very distracted by my email and my phone, and I see these like things pop up, and I know that I have other things going on, but I sometimes like pivot a little bit and say, okay, well, I can respond to this or I can do that. How do you deal with that distraction?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So what's great about that question too is, we're talking over Zoom. My phone is behind me about 20 feet across the room. I can't reach it. And if I were to walk over, it would be awkward because I'm exiting the Zoom camera. I also have all my devices on Do Not Disturb, and I don't even have email open as a tab on my browser right now because I know I would see like the 1, the 2, the 3 notification thing there. So my best advice, what works for me is I just eliminate distractions. And because I don't think there's a way that I can do what I do and be productive if I'm looking at, oh, I got a LinkedIn direct message or I got an email or I got a text message. And my best advice is just try to remove it as much as possible. And that's so critical for me, especially with coaching, because I have to be very in the moment. I have to be very with the person. And if I'm not able to do that, if I'm allowing distractions in there, then I'm ultimately doing a disservice for those that I work with. So my best advice is figure out what can be a distraction and do your best to remove it completely during periods of deep work or meetings or whatever work you got going on that you really have to focus in for.
That's so helpful. And that's something that I think I should do more because I was just talking to somebody the other day and they were saying that their phone is constantly with them, even when they go to sleep. It's like right next to them.
Mm,
And they just feel like, okay, I might as well respond to that thing now or do that thing now. And I think there's nothing worse than when you know you're meeting with somebody and you can tell that their eyes are drifting somewhere else because they're responding to something, or you can hear the
yeah,
clicks on things. So that's very sound advice about how to, limit those distractions for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Sure. So one of the things that I find so interesting as I've gotten to know you more is that you do a lot too outside of your own work. So you enjoy woodworking, traveling, and I want to dive into those more about your personal pursuits and how those influence, I think, not just your personal life, but just your outlook on things in general. So talk to us a little bit about those personal pursuits.
Yeah, yeah. I think woodworking kind of fits into like this general creative bucket, right? Like I enjoy woodworking, I enjoy cooking, I enjoy writing, reading, and also cocktail making. So it's one of those things where it's a way that I'm able to explore my creativity and have fun while doing so. I think specifically, and I think there's a future article here somewhere. I think woodworking, it's been a hobby of mine for 7 years. I think that made me a better COO because if you think about it, running the operations of a business and doing woodworking, there's two things that really come to mind as similar themes. One of them is order of operations. If you're running a business model, you have not even hundreds of steps. You have thousands of steps that need to be done to keep the business model humming. It's the same thing if you're doing a project with woodworking, whether it's a cutting board or whether it's a dining room table. There's just all these steps you have to do in the correct order to the correct spec to have that beautiful piece at the end of the day. The other thing too is there's a lot of popularity with maker channels on YouTube. A lot of woodworkers kind of walking through their process. What they miss is that 80% of woodworking is just sanding. And it's the monotonous, it's the repetitive, it's the boring work. It's not sexy whatsoever. I think it's the same thing with operations in a lot of way. It's the backbone, it's fundamental to the business model, but also a lot of it is just making sure you keep the trains on time and doing that unsexy, repetitive work. So that's something where, again, I'm able to explore creativity and then also able to find a couple of comparisons between that hobby of woodworking and a lot of the work that I did in operations. And then, of course, for travel, it's one of those things that I love being able to explore, find different perspectives. And also, it's just great to be able to fully unplug and kind of see what happens and comes up with my brain with different ideas. I just did a trip to Joshua Tree. This was a couple of weeks ago, and it was great because I was with friends. We were in nature, and on a lot of the hikes, I just left my phone back. I said, "Hey, I don't need to have my phone with me. Y'all will take photos. I just want to be here, present with nature, present with you all." And I think the big benefits that I get out of travel is, again, seeing different perspective, experiencing different culture, but then also just being able to really turn myself off from work mode and recharge and rejuvenate. It really does keep me sane's a little bit too strong of a word, but it does keep me healthy and happy.
Mhm. Definitely. And I think I'll take that advice from you as a almost like as an action item for myself is to try to eliminate the phone time because I feel like that's something that's always on that side of my of my mind because it's so easy to take with you and to carry with you. And sometimes you just gotta let it put it to the side and not take it, with you on that on whatever journey you're going on. Um, this next question, I love asking this question, and I'm acknowledging that I'm saying mentor in this question, and I know you talked earlier about the definitions.
Mm,
But for the sake of this question, now if there's somebody else that you have in mind and they might not fit that mentor, please share that. But one question that we always ask people is, who has been an influential mentor in your career or in your life? And if you could chat a bit about the impact that they've had on your own journey, it could be professional or it could be personal. Is there somebody that you had in mind?
yeah. I'm gonna get warm and fuzzy with this answer. I'm gonna say both my parents. My dad specifically, that's where I got my work ethic from. That's where I got my no BS attitude from. My dad was an immigrant from Poland, worked in the steel mills, and was one of the most disciplined, kind, and thoughtful people. And I remember even just some of the principles that he taught me. Things like relationships are all that matter in the end. The worst thing to be in is a rush, which is one of those kind of principles that sneak up and you're like, oh, that is a very good one to ponder. And he was always someone who was of service, so always offering a helping hand to others, saying please and thank you, the importance of being kind and thoughtful. And then also, this is a big one that I use, I think, just about every day, evaluating someone, what they do, the actions they take, not necessarily what they say. And then on my mom's side, my mom's also a creative and she has one of the most open hearts. And I was just back in the Philly area in August. We did a day trip, my mom and I, to Lancaster, and it was such a fun trip because she does sewing and quilting. So we went to all these fabric shops, and I do woodworking. So we went to all these furniture stores and wood shops, and it's just one of those things that the older I get, the more time I'm able to spend in reflection and with family. The more I'm like, oh, the apple really doesn't fall too far from the tree, and I have so much to be thankful for and grateful for with both my parents.
Oh, I love that answer. I love that answer. And I'm sure they're just so proud of you and everything that you have achieved. So that's so wonderful.
Thank you so much.
This is my favorite question to ask. And I know I mentioned it to you before because some people, interestingly enough, don't know how to answer this question or they haven't reflected about it enough. And I like to ask it because it's very reflective, I think, of a lot of the work that we all do. And, you don't have to know how to play chess in order to answer this question. But I'm curious about what does this concept or term of unleashing your inner queen mean to you? And along with that, how do you unleash your inner queen?
Yeah. When I was reflecting on that question, the motto, the saying that kept coming to mind was one of Francis Hesselbein's, "To serve is to live." And I know with the work that you do, it's finding a lot of those connections between the game of chess and the game of life. And when I think about, what does inner queen mean to me? What does that look like to unleash that? I really think for me, it's, living a life of service, to be able to give back, to be kind, to have impact with others. And I really just think that's a winning strategy in the game of life. So for me, what comes up is, again, that wonderful motto saying, to serve is to live.
We love that, and we love Princess Hesselbein. That's such a big part of both of our journey. So that's wonderful. The last thing I'll plug is that you wrote a book. So can you just talk about that? It's such an exciting thing. So please share more.
Yeah, yeah. I this is the day after publish day, so you are getting me full of energy because I definitely didn't have a slam-packed day yesterday. But the book is called Many Many Hats. It's me taking some time to reflect. I've been in the startup space for over a decade, and I've worn, as the title suggests, many many hats. I've been an accelerator director. I've been a head of growth, co-founder, COO, ecosystem builder, and now an executive coach who still works with a lot of high growth startup founders. So this is me taking some time to say, what have I learned through my own journey, through also working with a few hundred startups and putting those best practices, those frameworks, ultimately opinions, into a book to give back to the startup community. Something I wanted to highlight is I'm not selling the book. I'm asking people to make a donation to the ARC Alliance to be able to get a copy of the book. And if you're a student, just send me an email. I'll get you the book on me. But really, it's one of those things where I wanted to, again, share what I've learned in a attempt, in a hope that it'll help founders that are building, the startups, the companies of tomorrow, have a little bit more guidance, a little bit more answers, possibly even a little bit more certainty and confidence in the direction that they're building.
And I just like to say, I think that's such a testament to who you are, that you are not selling this book. There are the donations that are going to a very important cause. And we'll include all of the links, of course, for this and information about, the organization and what that looks like to get the book. But I think that's just such a important thing to note that, you know, you want to spread this information out, you want the world to know, and you're making such a positive impact by doing so. So that's very exciting, and congratulations, because that's a big deal.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for you know, taking the time. And I always like to ask to end, is there anything else that you want to make sure that people know or to share?
Yeah, I think we covered mostly anything and everything. I would say if you're interested in connecting, you can find me on LinkedIn or at the CEO Strategy, the business that I run. Even if it's just Max, I have a question, or Max, I want to brainstorm with somebody. I have had so many people, you know, give their time to me to do a coffee chat, to brainstorm with me, to listen to me just kind of vent about where I'm at life. So if you are looking for somebody to be that for you and just kind of, you know, whether it's shooting the shit or kind of offering a little bit of advice, please feel free to reach out. I'm always looking to connect with folks, particularly people in the wonderful, wonderful city that is the city of Pittsburgh. So don't be a stranger. Reach out if I can help in any way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We so appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you again for having me.